Okay. We are live, I think,
Okay.
right now. So let's start this thing. Hi Mark, how are you? Thank you for coming to the Rigging Bodies podcast.
You're welcome.
Was I'm really happy to have you here. I think we have been talking a little ahead before starting the stream, and there's a lot of
All right.
nice information, and I'm still a little lost on all the amount of information, but I hope I get my my way to get more clear in my mind all this stuff, because I think it's super interesting what you're doing, and I also realize how much I still have to learn stuff. Like amazing. It's I feel like every time I'll hear to someone explain stuff, I know less and less instead of more. When I like feeling. Thank you so much. Please introduce yourself and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So, I'm Mark Jackson. Been running Red Nine along with my partner Franco, who's on there somewhere by the look of it, for 5 years now, I think it is. Been in the industry for 30 years, hence all the grey hair. Started out as kind of doing corporate graphics and spinning chrome logos when spinning chrome logos were a big thing. Um, Went into VFX, spent 6 years in VFX in Birmingham and London at a place called TVG, which later became Graffiti Post, and that was kind of the big break, really. I doubt anybody will remember, but that was on a machine called Symbolics, which was the ultimate piece of kit at that time, and I think there's about 12 of them in the country, and that was really good fun. That was when it was really hard work.
Symbolics.
Um,
That's before SGI.
this was a Lisp machine. It was a military grade
Oh
Lisp
wow,
machine.
wow,
It was kind of the size of a night storage radiator. It was, I don't know
amazing.
what length of a table it was a big thing. And that went out to a Quantel Harry, which was even bigger. It was like 6 foot tall racking bays, and there was three of them. It was a beast of a thing. Um, and anyway, that was kind of the big break. Did quite a few commercials, mainly for Nintendo, which is kind of bizarre that I now work for games. But we ended up doing a lot of Nintendo commercials back in the 90s. Um, and then managed somehow I diverted into games. It was one of those meetings that I had with somebody, and I'd just come off the back of doing a 4 month stint, sleeping on the back of a couch in a London in a London suite, watching a scanline render going down for a commercial, and I burnt myself out. I'd been doing it for 4 months solid. Um, and a friend happened to say, "Oh, there's a new company starting up in Nottingham, and they want someone to do a pre-rendered sequence." And okay, how long have you got? Got a year and a half to do a minute's worth of sequence. I leapt at it.
Wow.
Um, and that was my introduction to soft image. So I spent a year and a half at that place called Clockwork Games, which was brilliant. It was like a sixth form party all day. They went bust, joined Eurocom, and Eurocom is really where everything fell into place, I guess. Eurocom was at the time one of the biggest independent games companies. There was like 300 people there in the peak. 5 different games tunes running at the same time. Everything from Ice Age to Pirates of the Caribbean to robots to any game. James Bond. I started with James Bond Nightfire. That was my first game for Eurocom. And as we were just saying, it kind of got to the point where I was getting so frustrated that nobody was doing what I saw things right, and it still to this day happens. A game would start, an animator would go, "I've seen Jason Schiffler's rigging tutorial. I can rig. I'll do it for this game," and they would do it, and they would do it badly, and things would break, and everyone would work really stupid hours. And then at the end of that game, someone else would say, "I've done rigging." And it went on like that, and it got very silly.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I want to say like almost every rigger I know started like that, but then keep rigging instead of going back to animation. That
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I started as an animator, man. I went in as lead animator,
yeah.
and we did a game called Athens, which was basically where the Red Nine rig and where the Eurocom rig and where all the rigging started for me. That was because it was a game where we had equestrian mocap, we had gymnastics mocap, we had the US number one gymnast in Texas in the mocap suit, and he was doing things that you just think, oh God, as a rigger, you just look at it and go, oh, it's going to break, and that's really where I started coding. I coded the rig from Jason Schiffler's stuff, as everyone else did at that time. This was back in 2001, I think it was. And that rig pretty much survived all the way through Eurocom. It got developed and developed and developed, and we found bugs in it, and we figured, we moved systems around, and it started doing normal mocap, and then it had to do super stretchy, cartoony stuff for Ice Age, where things went boing, and twisted and all that sort of stuff. But really, that's where most of the rigging tools and the animation binder stuff and all of that came from. And at the end of Athens, I managed to persuade the directors that wouldn't it be a good idea if you give me a team and I go away and I set up an R&D team. And we did. We set up an R&D team with Franco was on it. In fact, Franco's followed me around like for the last 10 years. Sorry, Franco.
Oh, it's here in the chat. Hi, Franco.
Actually, 15 years. God. So I mean, we set the R&D team up, and it was quite a thing at the time. This was a company with 300 staff, 5 teams, and we had an R&D department who just wrote the rigging tools and the facial tools and the facial solving tools. The R&D, that was the R&D department. We had a rigging department who used those tools to build the rigs as a centralized team. We had a facial department who built the facial, and it was but that was the reason we could turn things around so quick, because it was and it was a pipeline that ran and ran and ran for, 11 years I was there. And towards the end, I started thinking, Eurocom was starting to get a little bit twitchy in terms of, was it still going to be there? And I started doing Red 9 because I could see all these tools were really, really useful, but I didn't want to lose the knowledge of this as I moved on in career. So Red 9 came about probably the last 6 months of Eurocom, and we weren't allowed under contract to do anything at all. If you wrote a book, they owned it. If you did anything, they owned it. And that's really where Red 9 came, the name, because everything at Eurocom was Ginger tools. As I said earlier on, I used to have a big ginger, bright hair. So it was Ginger Tools. And I couldn't call it Ginger Tools because everyone knew I'd wrote it, so I called it Red 9. I don't know where the 9 came from.
So it's Redhead.
So it's been going, Red 9 Studio Pack has been going since I think I've got commits in there that go back and have comments about this doesn't work in 2009. So I mean, it's going back a long time now.
Yeah, it's 10 years now.
Yeah, it's been going.
Congratulations! It's 10 years anniversary.
Something like that. It's been going a long time. And I joined Crytek. I thought at the time it was the best thing out, because it was like Crytek for games at that point was one of the, you thought, yes, I want to reach that point. No, that didn't work out. If anyone has heard all the stories about what happened to Crytek and how they treated employees, it's probably true.
I didn't know anything.
And that was the impetus, because both myself and Franco were working at Crytek. Franco was at Frankfurt. I was in the UK. I was the animation technical director for the UK. Crytek had the same thing. This whole thing about nobody talked to each other, studios didn't share tech. It was ridiculous. And so I, kind of shook a few trees, and we started working together quite nicely. But we basically joined and made, we set Red 9 up because we were about to get, made redundant, really. And we thought, well, we hadn't been paid for 3-4 months, I think it was. So we set Red 9 up. We said, what have we got to lose? And what happened was that Crytek got bought or the UK studio got bought by Deep Silver. Mm-hmm. And I went back on the premise that I could carry on doing Red 9. I would start the company up, and I would go back part-time at the studio, and the other 2 days I'd work as Red 9 to get it going. Oh. So it actually worked quite well.
It's a very wise balance between starting a new startup basically and continue with the previous company. So yeah, very smart.
Well, it's been a long journey, but hey, we're getting there now. So yeah, Red 9 Consultancy's been going 5 years. It might even be 6 years in October, I think. Franco, I can't remember.
So basically,
5 years.
Red Nine, it's Franco and yourself, or
It is, yes. No,
okay.
there's two directors. We have a third shareholder. We've got quite a few outside people that we use for various things like character modeling and spare rigging if we need it. But
Mm,
basically, it's myself and Franco that do all of the hard uplifting in the code base.
mm. That's
And yeah, we effectively do pipelines and rigging and facial. We do everything we get involved with, which is
amazing.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. We was talking before started the stream on the amount of tools that you have, and it's massive. I mean,
Right.
it's incredible, and it's very unique, I think, because everybody, like myself included, we do like the auto rigging, but we don't think, or we don't care on the pipeline that much.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, I don't think I could even open them all up. It just goes too far. There's tons and tons and tons. I mean, it
Yeah,
is huge.
yeah, and
Uh,
yeah, I was I was listening to you before, like the amount, like you have like the core tools that it's like the browser, I think it's, and
yeah,
the meta node that is where all the connections and the magic happen between all this stuff, and then you can you go over a little bit, like again, for like I'm super down,
yeah.
so yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you can go over and explain me a little bit,
Okay.
like the overview, and what's the most interesting for you, because I think there's some tools that are like very unique that it's really worth to spend more time on this and understand
Yeah.
what they
I mean,
solve.
I kind of I tend to do a lot of demos and stuff about some of the big hitters, like the anim redirect for moving characters around the screen and some of the curve filtering tools. And I've done quite a few videos on this, but what I don't tend to talk about too much is the back end of what actually we class as a pipeline, really. And that's probably where most of the pain has come from. Like, the ability to manage what we call as a pipeline. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a definition between what is a collection of tools and what we class as this integrated thing. Studio, excuse me, Studio Pack is a collection of tools. That's, it's a lot of nice tools, but they are all tools in their own right, if that makes sense. ProPack, we kind of took the decision when we were writing it that we would try and unify things and have tools talk to each other. And if you write an animation format, that format should be readable, but it also should be readable and inspectable by all the other tools, and they should just know, you know, this data and how to share things around. So the first part of that is I think Morgan had a question about how do we manage the bigger scale of stuff, and a lot of it is done through there's two main things. One is what we call our project manager. So you've got to bear in mind that we work a lot with studios that have multiple projects going. We have a lot of clients using Perforce, and if you're not in games, that might not mean anything, but Perforce is the mother of all asset management and what 99% of games are, source controlled via. So we have full integration of Perforce within this, and it's done at a level where you can have multiple projects in Maya, and you can switch them from within Maya, and that will control the connection of Perforce, the workspace in Perforce, all the mountings that you've got, and all the paths. So we have this concept of a project object that all of the tools communicate through. Even things like we have health managers, and the health manager is specified within the project. So if you switch projects, it will switch the health managers. So all the tools just, you know.
The health manager is like quality assurance of all the assets and the
Yeah.
data.
Different ways of doing that, different ways of mounting. It's kind of dynamic. So I mean, actually, this stuff you can literally just open this project, just a JSON file. If you add something in there, it automatically gets added to the project object, and in Python you just inspect it. It's now a new attribute on that Python object. So that's really important, and that's something that's taken an awful lot of work to knit it in carefully. But the other one that we were talking about, I mean, if I just go into this one while we're here, actually, if I switch that on. So in terms of integrating, things like Perforce is integrated within exports, but it's also integrated at the level within our browsers. So if I switch to the project that is Perforce enabled,
Yeah, and something I would like to, sorry, interrupt you, but
No, no.
some talking about the performance and all these like source control and management, but can you put us a little bit on like antecedents, like what kind of data, like, because we are talking here like hundreds, thousands of files, like
Oh,
uh
geez.
like
Um,
like
yeah, I mean, Cloud Imperium, if you looked inside there, they've got hundreds of thousands of animations. You know, we're talking massive data sets. It's not, it's not a small collection. There are huge amounts of data. I mean, their audio alone and the facial alone is ridiculous. So we're having to manage these data sets and tie into them. And obviously, it also then comes down to this thing where whatever you do, you've got to be damn sure if you put it in a pipeline that it works, and that's probably the most painful part of it. So I mean, this stuff, this communicates with Perforce. This is all live in Perforce. If I turn it off, you'll see that actually I haven't got most of those assets. So that's a live Perforce view with the status indicator of where everything is. But we were also talking about the idea of bouncing assets around, and this whole thing about if you're going to do a pipeline should be able to move assets around very quickly within itself, as opposed to just we export, that's it, it's done. So one thing I wanted to go through was within the browser we've got this idea of protobind, and protobind is something again we've not really talked people through.
protobind.
Yeah, it's protobind. Basically, it is a way of pushing data from FBX through to the rig systems. And if we open this thing up, basically what it is it's if you've got FBX collections, in fact, this machine next to me is just doing it for another client. We've got 3,000 animations on their old skeleton. And this thing is pushing it over to their new skeleton, baking it onto the rigs, outputting it, doing a playback, exporting it, and giving them a MAV file. So it's running it as a big batch. So it's effectively taking one entire game set of assets and pushing it over to a new game, so they can just load it in and off it goes. Mm-hmm. And that's again a really important thing. The fact that we can batch select these and load this thing up and just go, yeah, push that over, and it will load the FBX, push it onto the rig, bake it off, and give us clean animation data. And I don't think, again, that it's all stuff because we try and do it so it's batchable. I don't think there's any other options out there for doing this sort of stuff. So that's I mean, forgive the mocap. I've just literally selected something from I think this is from the Maya base mocap set. It's just a really random thing that I've picked. But you can load FBX data and push it onto pretty much anything, which is really good. And that's with the HIK plugs. They run really nicely. We can also import them, so we can import it as a binder inside, so we can load multiples now.
Yeah, because the Human IK, it's a really nice intermediate system between the animation data and your final rig, because it handles the proportions, no? Like it can handle really well the conversion, no?
Exactly. The nice thing is, though, we can also halt it halfway through. So if I just pick, I don't know, let's pick something that's dance. What's that? There was some dance. Oh, there we go. Nightclub dance. Some of these were quite iffy. Let's have a look at that.
Dance nightclub.
We can do a transfer, and we can halt it halfway through the transfer. So this would be a live bind. So if anybody's seen the animation binding I did years and years ago, that's all still very relevant, because within this we've got the binder, but we've also got the ability to then offset this binder within that data before we bake it out and key that offsetting. So you've got HIK in one layer, you've got the abstract offsets in another layer, and then you've got the rig. So you've got these multiple layers that you can do an adjustment on a piece of data. The really nice one, this is where the integration comes, is that FBX transfer hasn't just transferred it. What it's done is it's looked inside the FBX, it's found, excuse me,
I get the takes also.
Gets the takes, it puts the takes info in there, and it names it. So this is so it's actually set those 3 rigs up ready for output. So it can then just re-output them as another sequence if you wanted to. And again, that's something that we do an awful lot of. If I go back to this boring one, which I keep meaning to replace, and one of these days I will, if I open the Explorer back up, So this is a file that's got 5 export loops. I say export loops, they're just tags. That's all they are. What it does is kind of down to the client. We've got some clients where there are another 5, 10 different functions in here that sends it to all sorts of stuff. Generates all sorts of custom sidecar files, etc. So what it does, doesn't have to be an export, but it's the management of this thing.
Can I make a silly question related to the games? So basically, these text then they are exported like the different FVX files, or it's just the same FVX file with a different like in and outs on the frame. So then the game is gonna take these like inputs and outputs of the same file and use it on real time.
This particular one is a file, because it's easy to animate like this, that's been split up into 5 different outputs. So you've got the walk to idle, and a sit, which is pretty standard. If it was an FBX, you'd probably mocap in one shoot, you do it, and then you do the same thing, you clean it and output it as one set of data. So this will generate.
Okay.
I've got any.
Okay.
Here we go.
Yeah, I think we just lost the live connection. Woo-hoo.
Oh.
Yeah, 1 second. We have an ictus. No data. It's still.
We still going?
I think we are good. I'm just listening here on the laptop, but I don't know. Maybe someone in the chat can confirm that if they lost something. Sorry, guys.
It's back now.
It's back now. Okay, thank you. Where was the last point that you was missing? Sorry, probably Mark. You just gonna be difficult maybe to take back the train of thoughts.
No, what I was just saying is that this is where the pipeline side of stuff comes from. So the FBX options that we set in the exporter also affect when you come into the browser. If you're going into batch mode, this is the same options that this will then use. So everything is tied together. And the biggest one really that we do is particularly for the R9 anim. If I were to output all of this data as R9 anim files, what happens within the R9 anim is one up. No, that's not one. There we go. It preserves all of the data. So let's go back into that. Where's my bottle in the way. So within this we have 5 bits of data, and if I were to output that R9 anim output, that's it, output. It's really quick, the R9 anim. So for those who aren't aware, R9 anim is our own custom animation format. We wrote it really as a thing against Atom, because Atom was meant to be the mother of all animation transfer formats, and it failed miserably, really. It's got all the usual issues of Autodesk, which is, if the name of the object is not the name that you saved it with, it won't load. If then there's no mapping of control in that. So we kind of decided that we'd take what we'd done for Studio Pack and the pose saver, and we'd wrap it into an animation. So the format is exactly the same as the pose, but it's got animation data within it. And the beauty of it is that it also has, it also has a massive sidecar file. So I say sidecar. So the animation data is down here. This is all the pose data, and you can see we've got the key data. But when you inspect the mrig, we have all of this extra data, and this is all gathered by one function within the mrig that's called gather info, and it basically gets as much information about the mrig as it can, and it stores it wherever you need that data, if that makes sense. But what it means is that if I were to reload this rig, starting to lose my voice. If I were to reload this animation and I come into the R9 anim, just there, and we give it, where is it, X, that one, internals, resources, rigs, that one there. Okay, if we reload it, we get this thing come up, which is the post handler. So the idea is that the animation isn't just the animation, it's got extra data in there to say, well, actually, it had export systems within it, it had some audio data linked to it, it may or may not have had image planes with it. So all of this data is held within the R9 anim file, and if you want to, you can choose to restore it when you load the data back in. So it kind of becomes more than just an animation file. in this one, I'm going to do all of the anims by range. So this is the export data. There was 1, 2, 3, 5 loops, 2 audios. This is the pre-inspect. You can see what's going on. And if I were to just load that data, load relative. Yeah, load. It'll prompt me and say, do I want to rebuild them? Yes, and the audio. And what that's done is it's loaded the anim, but it's also reloaded the audio, and it's also restored the export systems that were in. So, we're trying to make it so that everything has this ability to inspect everything else.
So this also helps to to iterate between the data and the edition of the data, no? Like, so
sorry,
you can. Can you hear me?
Sorry, you're losing it. Yep, you're back. Go on.
Right. No, I was saying like with the system that you can iterate the data like this, so you can like take this pack of 5 loops, edit again, get back your audio, adjust something based on the audio, and republish everything again. So that's the purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I'm going to turn my I'll turn my my camera off just to try and save in case that's an issue. Are we still up?
No, it's dropping in my side. It's dropping in my side.
It's back.
Yeah, but I see here 0 kilobytes, and I don't know why.
That's just modern technology.
So, not sure why. It's there is a storm today, but I'm not losing your Skype connection, but I'm losing the streaming. So maybe it goes up and down the
okay.
Outgoing data. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry for that. Yeah.
Let's just do that. So as I say, with it, that's the idea. The idea is it maintains all the data that comes within it. But within the mrig code itself, there are a huge amount of calls to inspect, to get this data back, to use it for any other tools that might be. For example, with the Cloud Imperium stuff, most of their animation is now saved as R9 anim. It's not saved as MER file, purely because you can get all this data back very easily. But also the R9 anim is loadable as a relative thing. So I can load, I've got a walk cycle here that was saved off that first part. If I select an object and I go load relative from current frame, I'm not going to post load. I can load it, but I can load it relative to where my current object now is. So it'll load it, bosh, just there, and walk along. So for building libraries, for building an animation library, having it as the R9 anim makes it a lot more usable because it's a pose, but it's got the ability to load like this as well. So that's kind of really, really useful. But one thing that again, go back to maybe what Morgan was saying, which was this whole thing about how do we manage different client requests? How do you do stuff when one client wants one thing, one client wants another thing, and they kind of fight within each other? And that comes back to the meta rig, which is anybody who's watched any of the talks that we've done, the meta rig is the root of the system. Everything within ProPack realistically comes back to a metadata node. And the metadata node is just a network node. It's just a network node with connections, but with a huge API behind it to manage this data. And what tends to happen is that if clients want things that are slightly different than are normal, this is one from Slightly Mad. It's no secret that we're working with them. And basically what happens is that we just subclass it. We subclass it, and then when the code inspects, rather than it returning a Red9 rig, Pro rig, it will return a Slightly Mad Pro rig. And that then means that all the functions that are running then switch over to a different class. And because it's subclassed, it switches over to how we then leverage that data. Yes, Tim, I certainly can. How do we leverage metadata? Yes, it's a difficult one. So the basic of what I'll do is we'll go through the base of the rig. Maybe that's the idea, because we were talking originally about what happens if you have something like M gear and you want to use it with ProPack, which is probably a good thing to start. So this is our internal structures. And the mrig node itself is, like I say, if I just graph that node, graph network node, is just a node that is connected to all the relevant parts that it needs, and it has subnodes. So that's my what's that? That's an SRC system. So these are nodes, and they are walking through this wire here. So if I let me do, I didn't really want to go too much into code, but I'm going to do this just so you get the idea. Just make that up. That's the main call for everything. Get meta rigs and give me the first instance, and that basically will give me back this node here, this meta rig node. Whoops, this one here. It'll give me that node, but it'll instantiate it as our pro meta rig class. Okay. But the nice thing is, if I go mrig dot, anything that comes within this, let's say we want to find the left arm system. That's my left arm system. But that's actually now returning the subsystem. So that's actually walked the wire. It's looked at the wire that's called left arm system, which is somewhere on there. I can't. Left arm system there. It's found this node, and it's gone. You're an ARM system, therefore return me as an ARM system. And I can do. I can come into this and find those are my controllers. That's my pole controller. Bing. So when we find stuff within systems, we find it by walking the wires. It's when we started the Studio Pack stuff. Studio Pack is very much open in terms of you can find things by anything. As long as you find a node, there's filters to find things in the right orders, etc. MetaRig is slightly different. MetaRig goes through the wires. We still have a fail-safe. So if, for example, we've saved animations and someone's changed all the structures of the mrig, we can still load the data via the naming, via the index it finds it, via the mirror index that's on that data. So there's 4 or 5 different ways of extracting the data. But effectively, when we're talking MetaRigs, we're talking about going from one system to another and stepping over the systems. Mm-hmm. On each one of these systems, there is a huge amount of data within this. So if I go mrig.load, load animation, load the zero pose, if you come into the API docs, we've spent quite a long time trying to get these things up and running properly. All the functions that are available are in here. We go to MetaRig, go to the key class, mrig. It goes on forever. There are a ridiculous amount of functions now on Meta. If we're talking about things like space savers or switches or any of that sort of stuff, the base code is already done. The hard part for that, when you're talking about customization, is knowing the difference between your rig and our rig, and that's the real hard part. All the base functions for doing stuff are in MetaRig. If you want a subclass, it's really easy. I mean, that's it. You just need that. Basically, obviously, you wouldn't call it that. You call it, mgear metanode or whatever. And then all the functions that are on there, you can expose. This one, for example, was written for one client who they'd written their own in-house rigging system. Quite a big, very big company. They'd written their own in-house rigging system, but the way they connected the wires didn't quite fit to how we normally do it. So we added this, which is the method for getting the IK chain, and it's via there's 4 or 5 different ways of extracting that data. So in theirs, we just overloaded that, and that then returned the stuff that we needed, and everything worked. So that's kind of one of the biggest things. So if you have dynamic hierarchies and you're able to reconstruct Python objects or MA graph, yes, effectively. What's more, if it's a Maya node, if for anyone that's not aware of Meta in its most basic form, it's if I get a camera, for example, and I can turn it into, so we've got cam equals meta dot meta caps lock. I'm a devil at that. Meta dot class, and we give it the camera, which is big like that. So that's now my camera. Cam is now, and then cam is it's also wrapped with M objects, so cam is a pointer to the M object, so it doesn't matter if I rename it, it'll always find it within the systems. And when it does it, it inspects the attributes dynamically, and all the attributes that are bound to that camera will be available directly on your .complete. So everything that's bound is already there. If you did it with a shape node, I mean, again, we just kind of take this stuff for granted, but it is, it's a really big concept in the way we work. If I do that, for example, camera depth, there's a camera depth, everything is there. And the setting and the getting is just done for you. So the minute it's an M node, all your attribute management is pretty much done for you. Even adding attributes to it is one line of code. You literally just go add atta, whatever you want to call it. You watch me do this wrong, and if I give it a value, it will look at that, it'll inspect it, and it'll figure out that F is actually a float, and it should have put F as a float atta on the thing. There it goes, F. Yeah, really easy. So that's the base concept. And like I say, by expanding that into the rigging system, it just means that things are so much more simple to manage.
That's very interesting indeed. Yeah, it's similar. Like we use a lot of PyML on mgear, you know.
Yes.
So it's similar how PyML wraps the object, I think.
Yeah.
But this is very specific for rigging, so it is very, very cool.
No, it's not. This is just it. So no. Oh God, no. Everything that we've got within systems relies on the M node. So for example, when the online anim restored that audio is connected to an audio node, which is just a network node with wires to the audio, and we inspect that. It comes back as an audio node, and that's how we manage the data. And because we're walking the systems and we're finding these nodes, there's so many calls to get things back in the right order and the right names. Each one of them has this idea about we're gathering the info, we're consuming the info. If they're subclassed off meta, off the actual rigging systems, they all have the ability to save and load poses, and all of that stuff is done for you. So it's not specific to rigging. It's just that the meta rig, obviously the big subclass, the meta rig is, but all the rest of the management isn't. And we were talking about how to get data onto a fresh rig. So this rig, what I've done is I've loaded it, but I've deleted all the nodes. So our system knows nothing about it. It is now just a rig. And you can see it in the rig manager and pro, it's all red. If I click on the create fresh node, I'm going to create an external rig, which turns it green. There's the M rig. So that's the base class node, and I'm just going to connect a few things to it. In fact, let's connect everything to it. Connect all those. Add controllers. Yes. Add the main. Add the locomotion route. You don't actually have to put all these in place, but it does kind of help. Export tag we can put. So if you're working in games, we can come in and go. Oops, where is it? Export skeleton. Call it that. Save the zero pose. Zero pose is really, really, really useful. I can't honestly recommend. It's such an easy thing to do, and all it is just load zero pose. It's just a pose that's bound to that particular system. When it means that
to bind pose kind of.
Yeah, exactly, and it's just stored off as an attribute on the M rig, on the M class node itself. But that effectively is almost it. There are a few things that you need to do to teach it the order in which the hierarchy should be processed. So I'll just do that. Add donk, and that is pretty much it. That is now a meta rig. The rig.
So filter priorities. Okay, so you set like the process order by you selected in order obviously, and you said okay, so
yeah,
process this data in this order. So when you do transfers, it's gonna understand the order, so it's not gonna mess with the spaces on your animation.
Exactly. That's basically to stop your double transforms going on. And all of that data is stored actually on the M rig node itself. So none of it's stored inside. It's all stored on this one node, but it's just a network node. That's all it is. So, there's a zero pose that's stored off. So again, you can get to it all really, really easily. So, if I were to do the same M rig now, and I were to go mreg dot, we store it as zero pose. There we go. There's a zero pose. Gosh, there's all your data. It's so easy to get this stuff back in, in and out. And data handling is really good because it manages JSON and all that side of stuff.
Yeah, this is something I not exactly, but for instance, right now in our mgear, we use all on the guide. Once it's built, it's parsing by the names, and so it's not sometimes you have a bug or something that changed the name or by mistake. And exactly. And it's missing all the connections, and it's not difficult to fix, but it's not ideal. And systems like this, it's no problem at all.
It kind of comes back to this. So this is again, if we go to the pose and the online anim data set, the poses is stored. The actual key in the dictionary is the name of the object, just the short name, but we never use it. What we use is that, and that basically says that actually this node is connected to a system called the right arm system via a wire of that. And that's how we find the data. If that fails because someone's renamed it, we can still look at the long name, we can still look at the key, we can still look at the ID, which is the Autodesk way of doing it. It's the 18th thing in the stack, which is useless. Or we can look at the mirror ID, which basically says that that controller is on the right side and it's index slot number 8. So that, it's trying to take stuff and not tie down everything via one particular method. And this went in recently, so this is what I was telling you about earlier on, where I can now store out that connection. So if you carefully crafted that data set, let's just store that on D drive. Delete me. Yep. Yes. If I now delete the mrig, delete. Yes. Go away. It clears itself up. Nothing in there. Our system knows nothing about it. I can just come in and go load data map, and it will load back everything about the system, and that's the rig restored. So you can manually craft them, and now you can save this idea of a data map, which is all of the connection data for that rig, and it will just restore the rigs on the fly. So that's been quite a key thing that's gone in recently.
Yeah, it's really clean, really well thought, honestly.
The really, 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 really big one, which again we don't tend to talk too much about because it's really in the nitty gritty of pipelines. But this is probably the saver of our assets anyway in terms of when we deliver stuff, which is the health systems. Yeah. And the idea of the health systems is that they are a collection of tests that we've written. The tests are really, really, really easy to write. Anyone with a bit of programming knowledge can do them. They're really not difficult. For example,
if you pardon me, the comparison, like it's we are using like Publish. Do you know Publish?
No, we don't. No, this is just hand. It's all. But effectively, what happens is that there is a test and there is a fix. Okay, and the test runs and is expected to return a health object.
Yeah, so it's
very simple.
Yeah, it's similar what we are using, like unless, and I think. Yeah, maybe people will know also Publish, and this is like a plugin system also, so you can write your own unit test and
exactly. So you can write you write a test which is effectively it's got to do something, test something, and return an object. And if there is a fix, run it based on that return data.
Yeah, it's very cool. But and you have all in like one package, like per project. So it's a health, and it has all the tests on inside the health.
This is all about our tests are bound to the optimized class. So these are all the tests that we have in there's quite a few of them. But
okay, I see.
What happens the same as Meta when you open it. If you've got a custom module that has things that inherit from the health classes, when you load the manager, it will find what's being subclassed and it will inspect it and it'll put it in here. So if you set your own up and that's on a Python path and it's been imported when you booted Maya, it would be available here as your own custom tests.
Nice.
So, and like I say, that's the same as the metadata classes. When you do that, as long as they're live and they've been imported, all the registry systems will pick them up and they'll register so you can use them nicely.
Okay, you have like collections and compounds. Yeah. So can you explain a little bit?
Exactly. So collection is basically, this is just a collection of tests. They have no bearing on each other. They're just random tests. This one, for example. In fact, there's another one for.
Oh, I
see. Where are we? That one. This is actually quite a key test. This was written for a games client where they'd had a facial rig delivered and someone had deleted blend shapes in them, but left that blend slot empty.
I know. In games, you miss the index later, no?
An index, and the FBX basically takes that index, removes it, and then when you load the animation, everything gets loaded to the wrong.
Yeah. So I know. That the first time it happened to me, I was going bananas with that.
Yeah, so that's a fix for it. Basically, you run it and you fix it. What it does is it pads the indexes in. So the collection is just that. They have no bearing on each other. They're just tests that you can run. That'll pass because there's no blend shapes in the scene.
And it has its own fix. So you can run it, say it's not passing, and you can fix it.
And then, exactly. And then the compound is basically, you run it from here, and it's meant to run, and everything is meant to pass. This one is not run. T-pose, hang on a second. Let me load an animation data because that will clearly bail. So this is effectively, the compound is a collection of tests that are meant to return yes. So in this case, if I was to try and deliver this as a rig to a client, I wouldn't, because it fails all the tests. And it's basically saying, no, you can't deliver it. And if you look at them, obviously the rig has keys. Well, it's animated, so yes, but you can inspect what's going on. And in here, it'll tell you these are all failed because they have keys. And the fixed method is strip the keys off, so he'll go back to T-pose. Their time range. That is basically a test that says it's got to be within 0 to 100 frames. Well, this frame range is, 150, so fixed. So they're all things, a lot of them are very little simple tests, but they're the kind of things that when you're working with clients and you're working with lots of different clients, they will bite you in the bum, like the frame rate.
Yeah.
We've got tests for when we open the mouse scene, you'll get a big warning that says the frame rate's wrong, the scene units are wrong, things that animators wouldn't notice at first, but they'd carry on all day working, and then they'd submit it, and then the supervisor will go, this is all wrong, you've animated it 24 frames a second, it should be 30, or. So that's the idea. And the idea, like I say, of the collector is if I show you the one that we've just run, which is testing. No, it's not testing. It's health. That's all. So that's the file we've just run. Test health rig health. Test rig health. And basically, these are the tests. That's the test I'm running. I expect that, which in this case is the project data. So it's bound to the project data itself. Remember, we're saying we have this object which holds everything about the systems, which is called project data, and the scene units are obviously what this particular client has spec. So that's, like I say, that's probably the biggest thing that from in terms of publishing stuff out, that's a really big concept.
Yeah, I think it's very important, like the unit testing or quality control that I call, like it's very important, especially when you're talking about volume,
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Because if you have to check by hand every single asset, you're not gonna finish.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've both been there. We've been around long enough to know that what you put out is only as good as whoever's checked it. So to write something that does it for you, if it fails, you write a new.
Yeah, and always, like, you need to check every single time, because it's something that you check once, you think it's gonna be good, you change something, and you give for granted that the other part didn't change, but it did change, and you publish without checking it, and you sell. Yeah.
So I mean, if I were to switch over to the Cloud Imperium branch, they've probably got 20 separate custom health tests, and it would be a delivery from so and so has arrived. It might be this is a model delivery, so there'll be a health test for it. Does it comply with all our standards? It might be an animator outsource has delivered. Is it a clean scene? Yes. Is it all of the things that that are a pain to physically go through? There's just a test there. Just grab it, now run it, and it's passed. No, it's failed. So that's a really big concept that we were talking about.
Yeah, it's I cannot stress enough that part, because it's it's very important.
I mean, as I said, I kind of wasn't going to go through any anim tools because I sort of done them. I always go through this, but no, sorry. I always tend to go through the one that I like the best, and maybe I will just because it's one of those that we've spent so long working on the damn thing that it's worth knowing about. It's just Q.
The animation. I saw the demo. I didn't watch the video all through, but I saw the demo on the redirection thing, and it's really cool. Yeah, if you can show that one, it's
Let's do that. So I don't know why it's a different color. That's strange. It's probably an old file. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So this will do. I don't know why it's not textured or colored.
The gamma, maybe the thing. No.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Whatever. Who cares?
Yeah, it's nice.
It's a rig. Okay, so let's just. So this was written. Again, it's written for a client. What we tend to do is clients put requests in for tools, and usually we kind of make them aware that if you request a tool, we will do it for you, but it will go in pro. And when we first started doing this, there was this kind of, well, we've paid for it, and yes, you have, but if you release it and we put it in pro, A, it will be managed by us, and B, it'll be managed by other people who will then request tools, and you'll then get, gain the benefit.
Yeah, it's a win-win situation. Yeah,
it is, and it was initially it was a bit of a, because there's one client effectively paying for everything because that was the main
No,
client.
what the client was choosing
They,
what features are, what features not that are
exactly.
fit more for his needs. So it's a, I mean, and also it's gonna pay less if more people use it later for maintenance. So
Exactly. So I
I
mean,
always see like this as a win-win situation, and yeah, it's not. I mean, I don't think in any point must be super like I don't know edge technology or something like super secret, like things that maybe have Nvidia or super high tech companies.
we've got very very custom pipes for clients that obviously they're done for that client, and that is that client's own systems. But if it's something that goes in pro, it goes in pro, and we then maintain it, so they don't have to maintain it, and everybody else requests, and they get the benefits of those updates. So really, really quickly on this, we've got an animation. He's walking through the door, and the lead environment guy's now gone like that, and all of a sudden the cutscene that they spent ages, they've got to redirect it, and it's in the wrong place, and doing that by hand is a pain in the arse. Um, so it was originally written for, say, one client who they had done a mocap shoot. There was two characters walking side by side, and it was meant to be walking straight along a spaceship corridor, but obviously there was no space in the volume. So they walked them around in circles, and they wanted a way of straightening that data out without them spending weeks and weeks doing it. So the idea is that you select a time range, and I'm going to do a small time range because I can't be bothered to wait for it to process. Let's do that. Do that range there. Set the range. I'm going to build raw guide. So there are lots of options in this, and we'll go through some of them just kind of briefly. So there's the data set for it. You can see we've got a tracker there. That's basically saying this is where the center pivot for that track data is going to be. Generally speaking, it needs to be fractional knots because it's basically a motion path. Really, it's a motion path, but it's very carefully managed. So I'm just going to stick the data, which effectively will cache that data onto the point cloud. And then it gets fun because that's all cached. What we can do now is we can go make live, bonk, and then we can start pulling this data around. So I can, well, by default, they're all parented in world space. I can do this thing called lock start, which basically parents them from the start forwards, or I can do lock end, which locks that end and parents them from the end backwards, if that makes sense. I can just move the thing around and ding, and do whatever I want to do. Let's have a look at that. Oh, he's walking along. Yeah, that kind of does it.
Great. It
And
also
it's
works
it's.
for others. Like it's only for biped or works for quadruped or other.
I have got a test with a quad that, the quadruped stuff is coming, will be coming. We just need a bit more time to do it. So yeah, the idea with the quad is it would bank around the corner, but again, it's one of those that needs quite a bit more development. The straight, like I say, was a really cool one because we can just do that. So obviously I've moved some of this data around, which is why it's not straightening.
So you had the
But
client that was running on circles and they wanted straight.
there you go. Yeah, he's moved like that because obviously I've moved these knots. I should be able to just blend back to original, actually. Blend back to original. Oh, there you go. And he's now walking a straight line. And we've not done any work on that, and it's live. And you can key these if you really wanted to. You can key them and do all sorts of strange things. We've had people use them. We had one games client in particular that used it for doing all the motion sets and doing things like strafe 45 degrees, strafe right, strafe left, and they just set them up this, and they just did it all because he could just dial in 45 degrees and there he goes. So yeah, I mean that's probably one of the bigger tools that we've done, and quite a useful one.
Yeah, indeed, it's.
How
I think it's
are we
really
doing for
good.
time? How are we doing for time? We're not too bad, are we? I thought I'd be running on for
Yeah, no,
ages.
no, 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 no. It's
As I
very
say,
good. I was checking because we started talking before we started streaming, and I was thinking, oh, we have been more than an hour, but no, it's not. We
no,
didn't make the mark to 1 hour yet, so it's five
I
minutes.
can talk forever. I mean, the metadata stuff I can talk forever on. I mean, I don't know. Have we answered Morgan's stuff, which was basically how we deal with custom requests and things
Yeah,
that make conflict with the way that we do them?
I
Uh,
think was one question. No, feedback
oh,
for
there
us.
was, yeah. Brad as well. Brad was talking about how the parallel and the caching
Oh yeah.
affect do. It doesn't really, and I say it doesn't. If we didn't have the code to manage it, it would, because it would break everything that we do. So anything that you parse in time, like this sort of stuff, um, kind of is affected by the parallel, because obviously you've got the Python single thread going after the multi-threads, and things just break, get out of sync, and man, it just crashes. Um, but we've got in the code base, and this is in the studio pack, so it's available to everybody. In general, there are a ton of context managers, which are, where are we? So we have the animation context manager, which will manage the evaluation state. It will manage undo stack, the time, the auto key, and basically whenever we do any function that has anything to do with time or animation, we invoke this context manager. So the first thing it does is it turns off your parallel evaluation, throws Mayor back to DG mode, does all its processing, and then throws it back when it comes to the side. Then that stops 90% of crashing.
Nice.
And it's
Yeah, the thing is with the parallel evaluation, and you have a really nice performance when he evaluate the rig, the first frames, and then you process normally just adding keyframes. That's but the parallel evaluation, if you change in the rig, let's say maybe in your one of your tools is changing spaces or doing something, creating constraints to do something, and then process the data and then back, or maybe
yeah,
per frame. A parallel is the worst thing that you can have, because it's
it
gonna
is.
reevaluate the rig every single frame for a few seconds maybe, and it's gonna be slower than DG.
It is, and it also gets out of sync, which is why Mayor then just crashes a lot
Yeah,
of the time.
yeah, and it
So,
also
so
crash. So
exactly.
yeah, everything must be like used on the right moment for the right purpose. So not
Precisely.
all the technology it's the best for any situation. And I think I
No,
was
I mean, sorry, go
yeah no no I think I was talking the other day in the podcast on the we have this shot sculpting tool,
on.
and because shot sculpting implies that every frame or every X frames you do like a new blend shape
Yeah,
that you model. No, so it's very simple, the concept itself. But because it was in parallel, of course, every frame I add a new blend shape for a few objects at a time, and I move the next frame to continue. It was super slow. It was like not crashing, but like annoying slow, because it gets to reveal all the evaluation graph again before can process the next frame. So you go to DG and it goes butter smooth.
exactly. So, it's literally as easy as, so this is, so the evaluate, I mean, we've got several context managers for, managing progress bars and HIK and all sorts of bits and bobs. Excuse me. But that's the main one. And it's just that's it. You just import on general and throw the context manager on, and that deals with it. You don't have to worry about it. It manages your auto key, so you can, mess around with it. Manages your undo stack if you want to. So when you go into the undo, it will make an undo chunk, and you can do whatever you like, and it will come back as a single undo chunk after it. So we've got a lot of little bits like that have just come through from writing this code for a long, long time, and having lots of different clients calling stuff and things breaking, and
Are you jumping on the 2019 train, like with the cache playback? Do you have any client using it yet? If you
we
can say it or not, I don't know. But
we do. We have one client using 2019. I think they're on point one.
the
And
point one. Yeah.
they're on point one, and so far, when I've tried doing their stuff, it's crashed about 10 times in one day.
Oh, terrible.
Um,
Well, one thing, I mean, if I can pitch you something for keep growing the tools, will be to
yes,
to manage the animation or the animation cache or the playback cache. You have
yes,
the concept of the filters. I think I'm not using the right word. It's the way that you ask the cache to be stored. Like for instance, you can
yes,
cache all the rig or only the mesh, or not the part that if it's the evaluation or the later the software render or the hardware render, but even the rig itself and the way that it stores the data, so it makes less destructive when you edit the data. it can be I mean edited and control a lot, and it's barely exposed that part. I mean, it's all on the API. You don't have like really access from the interface, but
Mhm.
you can manage how you cache that thing.
Well, it's funny. I mean, this is the Avala manager. There is we and this is how stupid it is. We wrote a plugin to control whether you've switched the Avala manager on and off, purely because it's not something that you can catch. So we actually wrote a plugin, and the only reason for that plugin is to catch and return what the thing's doing. Uh, um, and there was just little things like that just drive you mad.
Yeah,
Um, so
yeah.
there's a lot of back end history in this.
But yeah, I think this part it's much needed to manage because like an animator, not usually they're not really technical. I mean, there are animators are really technical, but let's say the vast majority they are not that technical. And for instance, for the playback, the cache playback, the the way that you default manage the rig and your RAM and how it stores the data, it can consume a lot of data really quickly.
Mm.
Like, and yeah, if you
Yeah,
can filter that, it consume like I did manually like some tests only for get the cache for the geometry, for instance, and it obviously if you when you change a frame between frames, it needs to recache more because it's more destructive, but at the same time, um, it's taking way less RAM and it makes more understandable to work because it doesn't need to flash and I don't know. You have like advantages and the disadvantages, but it looks more easier to work with
I,
than.
I think 2019 is going to raise a lot of issues. When clients start going onto it proper, I think it's going to be. I think we're going to hit a lot more
Yeah,
problems.
that's the reason because I'm saying like it needs to be like or to have more tools that manage that layer of
Yeah,
like I will say like complexity.
I mean,
If you can make
yeah,
it easier, it's gonna. I mean, it's work because the technology is. I think it's amazing. I mean, I'm really a believer on the technology and how they design it. But at the same time, it's not that the magic thing that it's gonna work in all situations.
I think it's this magic bullet that they're selling everybody, and I think ultimately it will be.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
The
super.
performance is really
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
Um,
and because yeah, it's not like not. I mean, and it's something I was. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm debating a little bit the conversation, but like the people say like all the time like but there's no real time and this is a cheap solution like caching everything, but it's not. I mean the thing is when you do complex rigs you cannot parallel everything. Sometimes it's impossible, like especially like facial rigs that you have multiple layers of like let's say local rigs that plug geometries to geometries to geometries. You need to evaluate that in a linear fashion because there is no way that you can parallelize that in a efficient way. I mean, you can parallelize something, but not everything.
I,
And
I I've got no problem with the way they've done it. I think it's
yeah, yeah, it's
it will.
brilliant. And the thing is like the only way to handle that quickly when you reach certain complexity, it's like caching. I mean,
Yeah,
and it's not like because I heard some like rash comments like people say this is a cheap solution like caching and things, and it's not.
it's no. It is. I agree. It's the only way really that they could have gone around it. From my perspective and knowledge, I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not a massive API man, but it certainly seems. But it's just that the threat
yeah,
that you know what's
yeah,
coming. You
yeah.
know bugs in
Yeah,
it.
yeah, me too. I mean, I'm not like engineer or like super brilliant on these terms, but I understand that that the thing it's not an easy solution.
No, no, it's not in the slightest. Especially things like this with with facial rigs, because this stuff just consumes power. And well, however you do facial rigs, they're always going to be heavy, especially when you start overloading them and doing things properly with them. Um, that pink thing, by the way, when I opened this file up, that came up, that was the health. We were just talking about the health. If I reload that file, but it's because my project is set at a different frame rate. So my version is 2016. My time unit test is wrong, so I fixed, so it's going to reset my time units. And it's that kind of stuff that we sort of take for granted. It's just stuff that shouldn't, Maya should
Yeah,
fix full stop.
but it's really nice. So it ran it just automatically when you load the scene. No? So it's under the hood. It's not like on demand.
No. So it's basically when you run testing. So actually, that's quite a good point, really. What happens is that within the structure of ProPack, there is an extra folder. When we start working with clients proper, we have this extra folder called Client Core. And within that, any subfolders become clients. So there's two levels. There is a client level, which is, in this case, testing. And the client level, in this case, has two projects within it. It has Project 1 and Project 2. So when I went into this thing down here, if I do that, I've got Project 1, which is alpha, and Project 2, which is beta. And they've got two different resource paths. So they've got two different project objects, if you like. And the project object is just a JSON file. But what we've done is we've just said, when this project opens, bind it to this particular one. When this one opens, bind it to this one. And when Maya boots, all we do is we register the health systems. And it's that one there. Set scene callback health is health testing and test scene open. And that is settable within the project. So you can set the scene open validation it's going to call based on your project. So you can construct your own. And it also gets called on, I think it gets called on file reference as well. I can't remember. Maybe it does. Maybe no. I don't think it does. There's other ones that get called on that. But it's bound at that level. So yeah, it just opens. And whatever you set, if you set things wrong, you can just set it. There are other ones that check the MAD version, which we use quite a lot for example, if we've got clients working on 2017, we've got clients working on 2019, 2018. Now it gets really hard to know which version of that Maya file they're meant to be delivered, and we put that into the health test. So when you open the file, it goes, this client is meant to be on 2018, you've opened it in 2019, close down, do something else. Really just tests like that that make a big difference. I don't know why I opened this. I just opened it. I opened it for that health reason, really. I think we've kind of covered a lot of the stuff. I mean, as I said, I can talk hours on all this stuff, but
one of the things is I wanted to ask you, like, can you briefly explain the difference between the free pack and the pro pack? What's sure. Mainly the
Okay, so everything we've just gone through is in pro. Studio Pack, why's that not doing it? So this is Studio Pack, this is Pro Pack, effectively. Pro Pack has all of the big animation tools. Studio Pack still has an awful lot of power. I mean, all the animation tools in here are used day in, day out by a lot of studios, and I know because I see who downloads it every time. Someone downloads from Exchange site, I get the little mail, and I get a lot of emails from it. So the one thing that I must do is the one that's currently on the Exchange site is really old. It's about 2 years old. I must get around to updating it, because whilst the UIs haven't changed that much, because obviously all our attention really has gone into ProPack, the actual API itself gets daily updated and bug fixed and extended and extended and extended. Primarily because obviously the metadata side of stuff, that is our core. The animation classes, particularly the Snap Transform class, there was some stuff that went into that recently that has massive impacts on Pro that we use. So if you kind of treat Studio Pack as the API, if you like, is the core API, ProPack feeds off that and extends it. That's kind of the definition, I guess, from it.
So the core, it's like the base.
Core is very much that. Everything in Pro will call core at some point, without fail. Be it the OS functions that we have in general, be it the animation functions that are obviously in the animation module. Core has a huge amount of base modules which is line core. Let's close that down. Particularly the filter node. For anybody who's never looked at the filter node is super, super useful if you don't get into metadata. Filter node was kind of written as the initial way of doing stuff, and then we kind of superseded it with metadata, but it's still very relevant. The metadata one itself, when we set that priority up, that was setting a filter node. And they're just in here, so maybe that's worth just quickly going as well, because that's quite a big thing. But there's a lot of small tools. I mean, even things like the snap, to this day, Maya cannot snap objects. It's, you can't get a cube and snap it into someone's hand. You can snap it on the top of the geometry, the bottom of the object, geometry, the left-handed, right-handed, average, but you can't snap that transform to that snaptron. They put in a call in 2019, I think it is. It might even be 18.
Yeah,
Max transform, I think they've
yeah,
called
yeah,
it.
yeah. I do
But
have my own also an M gear, like,
yeah,
and
but
it's
it's not
amazing.
time enabled.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not time. So you have to pass the scene to get the frame to do it, which is slower than trying to do it properly. And I requested, when you're doing it, at least make it time enabled so that we can say at this time snap these two objects, rather than having to pass the scene to update to manage the snap, because then it's just useless, really. But anyway, so I kind of lost my thread. So yeah, the core of this is everywhere, and the animation toolkit, like I say, this is massive. The thing with binding rigs. So, for example, I don't think we've got an M gear one in here. I'm fairly sure we haven't. We did have. I think we've got the old Morpheus stuff in here, and basically the filter node and the filter class is basically there for finding nodes within systems. And you can find them within systems by saying, well, okay, obviously from selected node I, that find nodes of type. Well, that's easy. We'll find a NURBS curve or NURBS surface. But you can also say, find for a specific attribute. You can find specific attributes. For example, I could go mirror index equals 1. That equals, so I can go through the entire lot that is a NURB curve that has a mirror index that equals 1, or I can go that has mirror index, or I can go, I think it's that, not mirror index, that doesn't have that attribute, but who has a name called arm. So it's a really, really powerful way. It's like an intersecting filter that you just layer the things up, and we use that all the time. Again, even the metadata uses this under the hood to find certain things within systems. That it's actually quicker to do that than it is to fire wires at everything. I think one of the things that is really dangerous is to wire everything and rely on everything being wired, because you just end up with this enormous great structure of things being wired, and sometimes it's just easier to find something by a marker attribute or by so that's kind of the biggest difference. The biggest difference is that Pro, other than this MRig flag, really is designed to be used with any rig, and it shouldn't matter what you throw at it, it should still work. The Pro Pack is predominantly metadata. I say predominantly because there is still, if you look in this, we can still open this, and that will open the filter class, and this will take a filter. So it will still run because the principles are the same, because this particular and the adding redirect user systems from the Studio Pack at the core level. So they are able to take these, and we just expose them there to say, well, you can potentially say, I've got a rig and this is the root of my rig, set root, and that's how we're going to filter the objects.
That's really nice. I think
so there is still that legacy in there.
Yeah. I would like to ask in the chat if someone has a question, and while we are waiting for some questions, I have my own question on because I do have some experience on games, but not really that much. I would like you to, if you can explain or give us some advice on the games pipeline specific, because you have experience in both areas, like the offline rendering stuff and games. And so what, what's the big difference? Or I know the basics, like obviously like limitation on joints and skinning things, like the rigging cannot be layered on terms of, especially in fascias, like we was talking before, now it should be one layer, so one lane shape node, one skin cluster, and that's it, no other deformation things. But what's on your experience, what is the things that the people like make more mistakes, or they stumble over and over on the same things? Can you give?
Probably skeletons. It's a stupid thing, but skeletons. The amount of times we get. So the way we work is when we build the systems rig, we have effectively, this is the rig. So this would be our rig. This is the client-based data. So what happens is that a client will usually supply us, depending on how they work, they usually supply us either they'll supply a body mesh and we'll build the skeletons, or they'll supply a skinned mesh, and that'll be their character for that game. And the amount of times you look at it and you go, no, and you have to send it back and reiterate it, and the proportions are wrong, the positionings are wrong, the orients are wrong. I know there's this big thing about orients, but they do still matter when you're setting things up. There's the amount of mistakes you get, arms on a plane, the simple things that people make massive mistakes. And the problem is that they supply it and they go, there's our character for the entire game. And, some of these games go on and on and on. We've got one at the moment we still can't talk about. We've done 15 facial rigs, all the body rigs, pipelines, all sorts for them. Still can't mention the name of the game or any of that. But, 2 years ago, we set the thing up. And the problem is at that point, you have to do your due diligence and set them up there, knowing that in 2 years' time, you will still be using this tech and it still has to run. And I think we've seen a lot of clients that come to us from games where it goes on what we were saying earlier on. Someone's joined up, they've done a rig, they've rigged it up, they've been running it for the last 6 months. That guy's left, they've actually decided that rig's crap and they're stuck with it. Or someone else comes in and goes, oh, I tell you what, I've got a new spangly one, we'll do it and we'll redo it. And they remap the animation data and then they leave and there's this, do you know what I mean? It's very difficult sometimes when you talk to clients to kind of say, the reason it costs this is because when you get the rig, it's gone through X number of games already. It's in production with, I think we've got about 400 seats of Pro running at the moment, and it's solid. And the biggest mistake we always see of games is just this whole thing about they don't put the time in to expect the animators will break things, and they will break things all the time. Yeah. When we do VFX stuff, it's very different because obviously you do a VFX, it might be that you've got a month to do it and then it's rendered and then it's on TV and you kind of think, well, but with games, it's this whole big, massive thing. And like I say, the ability to then be able to come in and just remap things and not worry that if you need to do a change, you can do.
You commit. You need to commit to the data and the technology that you use. Like you're saying, like if you have 2 years time frame to develop a game, like when you do the rigs and you need to go through all this, you need to commit to something with quality. You cannot say, oh, we will fix that in post-pro, in the nuke, or things like that.
Yeah, you can't just do that. It is what it is, and things like contact points. God, the amount of time people waste just trying to put a cup in someone's hand and actually have it beat in his hand as opposed to the wrong way around, the wrong attribute, the wrong order, the wrong, these, and we're kind of lucky that we're slightly removed from that side. We've done a due diligence, we've done all of that at various game studios, and we don't do it anymore. We deliver the asset knowing that hopefully it will work and that you won't cause breakages. But like I say, it's this whole, it's a different way of thinking. You either run a rig and you animate, and the animators just get on with it, and they do what they've always done. And there is still this thing within a lot of the games companies where they've always done it like that. Therefore, that's how it should be done. And sometimes it's difficult shaking a tree and kind of saying, well, actually, do you know what? I would do it like this, and you would actually save yourselves a day every week just because you're not doing it in that way. And that's where the likes of your stuff as well, come in, because it's been tested, people have used it, it's solid.
Sometimes it's very important. Yeah, this how you say, like, not because it's the latest technology or because it has the most newest feature, but because it's most solid in terms of, because it has been used for a long time, or more people give it the feedback, more people found the bugs. You spend more time fixing that part. So at the end, it's a very solid and robust system, whatever is the system. No,
exactly. We put stuff in this where things like soft IK. I mean, soft IK, Autodesk, it's an IK. The IK solver should have soft IK and stretch in it by default. You can turn them off, but it should be in there. We shouldn't be building networks to stretch things, and it's to me, it seems silly. That stuff should be in by default. So I mean, we have to put all these things in the rig itself, and we have to put trackers so that
And
we've got.
and when you say like orientations, you was, I mean, you meant like the famous joint
Yeah,
orientation in Maya, like the thousand tutorials on how to orient your joints and things like that.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
I mean, we're not that anal, but I'm kind of talking about things like just the actual pivot setups. Having arms that are not aligned in the plane. We see that a lot of times.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so it's not like just a pure orientation. It's just like the
Yeah,
joint placement. Like, yeah, it's not in the plane, so they yeah, and I know what you mean. Like, yeah,
and
the articulation it's going like funky, and where you need
yeah,
to usually use one uh, axis to rotate something, maybe you need to use the three axis to
exactly,
go into the place that it's of course a big
exactly.
problem.
So yeah, I mean we see that a lot, and that's what we're here for, to kind of say, we'll reorient it for it, and we'll reposition your joints so that they actually work a little bit better with what you're doing. That's probably the worst. I think Franco, you probably agree, he's on there somewhere.
Yeah.
No, he's not.
No, he's not.
He's
I don't
on
know.
there.
It's the chat. It's really silence. Maybe nobody is listening now. So
It might just be me and you.
we are alone. That's okay.
It might have dropped off 3 hours ago, for all we know.
Yeah,
It
well,
is still very, actually.
yeah, because it's lunchtime there. It's the
It's nearly 4 o'clock.
oh 4 o'clock. Oh no, it's not that bad. I mean,
Yeah.
you already
Uh,
have lunch. Or I was
I,
thinking,
I I
it,
think it might have dropped off.
yeah,
Uh,
but yeah. I mean, if it's no questions on the chat, I probably can keep talking and talking and asking you more and more questions until I know all the nitty gritty of all
no,
the.
that's it.
Yeah, but I guess okay.
Yeah, they are still there. They're just quiet. That's because I just talk total bullshit most of the time, and
No,
most
no,
people.
no, 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 no.
Most,
I found, I mean, super interesting. I feel, I mean, because I'm asking publicly, like this is like, I mean, live. Um, yeah, I feel shy to ask some questions. I'm gonna look like a more like super dumb. What the hell is doing
no, I
this
mean,
guy?
as I say, I quite happily waffle on for hours and hours on end, because there is. I think it's one of these things that we put so much in it that even being able to open the custom file format from there, there's
Oh,
so many tricks that we put in there that we can just open that data live from one place. Oh, that's an old one. I've pointed it to an old. Trust me to pick a file that hasn't got that support in it.
yeah, and
Uh,
also one thing like you do also like the consultancy. You mainly so go. I mean, you work around the world with many studios, so you do your stuff, but also you go on site and do training and things like that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we'll do whatever we're asked to do, really. I mean, generally, I mean, I was on a 2-hour conversation with a potential new client this morning in Australia. Talking to you today, we've got quite a few clients in Texas, bizarrely, and then we've got a few in Nottingham, and they're the really good ones, because I can go up to the pub and take the laptop and sit at the pub, and so
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we'll do whatever people
Yeah,
want
but
to talk.
well, talking the other week with Brad, it's I think Texas is quite strong in games.
It is, yeah. I mean, like I say, we've got up to 3 clients in Texas at the moment, all within a few miles of each other. And obviously, you've got Brad out there, and you've got Josh out there. So, I mean, at some point, I must get out to there and just
Yeah.
buy them a beer. Duncan, that's on there, was working at, I don't know whether he still is. I'm sure he'll go yes. Working at Studio Little, so that's up in Manchester, which we did some facial stuff for. And it's a small world, Everybody,
Yeah.
everybody. They always say everyone's within
It's
two.
it's very
Yeah.
it's very yeah, I know it's very small. I wish sometimes I can travel more. That's if I can like complain something about my job, it's like I barely travel to anywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
uh,
It
I just
I mean it's not, I mean I'm happy to go home every day, like, say family, kids. but at the same time, like I'm a bit jealous. Some people like they had the chance to travel, you know.
yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I'd like to travel a bit more, but you just stuck doing work. Unfortunately, these people still want work, and they keep coming to us, which is good, but it gets in the way of travel, traveling
No,
out to
I'm
the other
saying
side. I'm with that.
like work travel thing. So you do the both things.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean,
Like of course
if any,
vacations I do.
if anybody's going out to develop, I say out. If anyone's going out to develop in whenever it is, July the 11th, I think it is,
Yeah.
then you know, hit me up because I'll be there for some beers as well. Um,
I'm sorry. Where?
there's a conference down in Brighton in the UK called Develop, which is
Oh
basically just
no, I
piss
don't
up.
think I'm gonna make it.
Well, games you want
Yeah,
but that,
you should visit Japan. We have a few game companies here. Yeah.
yeah, we've not really
Yeah, a few.
done Japan yet. We've done everywhere else, but we've not really
Yeah,
broken Japan.
yeah. You should make the tour here, man. It's I mean, I was joking. There's not a few. There's a. I mean, the industry here is huge.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you
No,
imagine? But
we keep hanging. We keep pinging people.
yeah,
But
yeah.
that's one.
The
So,
only
well,
thing here, it's like I mean, you need. I mean, there's a lot of people that speak English, but yeah, to make business with Japan, you need Japanese. That's the
oh,
probably
that's it. I'm
the
screwed.
the yeah the biggest like complication, if I might say. But yeah, apart of that, I mean, it's yeah, there's a lot of companies, small, big sizes. It's a amazing industry here. Um, yeah, I think we have one question. Can MGear do facial rigging?
I'll let you answer.
Yeah. May I?
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Technically, you can do facial rigging with using MGear. Um, you have some tools like the eye rigger and to rig the lips and also like the components like a mouth and something like that. But what you don't have, it's like a template system, like for instance the advanced skeleton, where you go in and it's more like a point and click process to make a face. Um, yeah. And by the way, just plug here, I'm working on a facial rigging tutorial. So I
Yes,
don't know.
so
I don't know what. It's been months working on this, and I barely have time to advance a little. So it's gonna be there at some point. But yeah, we don't have like a facial like template thing like that. And the reason is because each project is different. You need different like solutions. So like if you need like something like this advanced skeleton template, you just go for it. Use advanced skeleton. Or if you have any other auto rigger for facial, like Ansobin did or something, just go for it. But in my case, I think it's solution. It's need to be crafted for each project.
facial is one of those that a lot of people write tools for, but don't actually understand what it needs. Writing a tool is one thing, but actually understanding facts and how muscles move is a whole different art
Yeah,
form.
yeah. The because also depends of the project. You need like facts. It's one system. Or
Are you
it's
back?
back. We are back.
Yay!
Yay! I think it's. You know what? I think it's storm here, and yeah, it's sometimes it goes out when it's a storm, and today it's a rainy season here in Japan. So yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I guess we are back now. So I was saying like there is a lot of systems, and depends of the system or the project. You need different systems, and for fact,
Yeah,
it's the thing that I found more difficult is to model the blend shapes. For me,
exactly.
facts, if you don't have a good like skin data library, like proper done for the character, I found extremely difficult to do it by yourself. And obviously, when you have the data, it doesn't make it easier either.
No, it doesn't.
And
No, I
if
mean
and
we
yes,
as we say,
yeah, go
we
ahead. Yeah.
we do an awful lot of facts-based stuff, and it is purely because there's very few people doing it, and it's bloody hard, to make things blend properly and make the shapes work properly
Yeah,
and know
yeah.
what they want. Uh, I was going to lead people on this because this is something that doesn't get talked about, but this is for maybe for VFX more, but certainly for games is one of those. Again, it's this whole thing about tying data together and making streams work together.
Mm-hmm.
And this is it's a terrible test. I apologize for the state of the test, but basically it's just timecode. So the rig has timecode. This is the timecode debugs up here. I don't know whether you can read that, 113, whatever it is. The audio files have timecode within them because they're BWAVs. There's timecode, and what I can do is I can set that as the reference for it, which basically says that frame is this timecode because this rig has it. And I can select my audio, and I can go bosh, and it'll just set them out. And the first time I showed that to one of the clients, they fell off the chair because they'd been, literally doing all this by hand and moving things around and trying to sync audio up and trying to move this audio so it's in the right place. And they just load it and sync it. But again, that's stored in the R9 anim, and if I save this data out, I can load the R9 anim against the time code I give it from something else. So I can give it this audio and say load against that audio, and it'll do that. So data sharing, it's this whole thing.
Yeah,
I've kind of gone off topic, but hey, there you go.
that's very nice. Yeah, and I didn't animate in for many years, and I think last time I animate something, well, last year I did a little clip, but it doesn't count. I think it was 9 keys or something. But I don't remember last time I put an audio clip in Maya. I barely remember how to put the audio.
I had a thing actually with the Maya audio side of stuff, and that was in Time Editor. The audio isn't audio. It's not an audio node anymore. It's a clip something with an audio attachment or something like that. So it doesn't actually come up as audio.
I don't have. I mean, honestly, I will have to look the manuals to put an audio.
It beggars to believe, you've got an audio system, you've got audio nodes, and they don't use audio nodes. And I'm sure there's a very good reason for it. But now that's a whole different set of dependencies that we've got to manage within audio. Yeah, but anyway, there you go.
Yeah, and just going back a little bit to the facial thing that I'm very interested in. I know you have a lot of experience with that. Like the so for for like the fax system that you use, like for instance, this example here, this is a fax rig, correct? Yeah. And the fax, it's the problem it's like you have like, I don't know, it's 50 something is the base of the fax thing, but then you need to do all the like what they call the blend shape combinatory system, where you start adding combinations and combinations and combinations until you have like 500 combinations or something like that. And it's it
is. I mean, this wasn't set up as a full-on render rig. This was quite a fast rig. The ones we're doing at the moment have I think we've got 145 base channels in there that we set up, which is fax plus combos plus the load of other backend code that this thing runs to make these things blend properly. And again, the problem we've got is that we can't show anybody it because it's been in production 2 years, but we can't show anybody what's going on.
Yeah, maybe we can make a second part of the stream in 2 years, and we can show it.
Exactly.
Yeah. But do you use any special tools for these systems? Like, do you have something or use another third party?
No, it's all custom. So we have that's our face systems.
Oh, so you have your combination.
Custom builders. We've got all the combos set in a separate base end. We've got sculpt systems. The sculpting we manage ourselves. So again, there's 5 years worth of code in there to make it work and just move forwards.
Yeah, I know. I use for what I use Shapes, the plugin. Yeah, I guess you know that this one.
Yeah.
It's very good. But I know also like there is one open source from Blur Studio, but I I didn't try it. And also there is another for independent developer, the DPK. I think it's DPK. I don't remember, blend shape system or something like that. That is also like a combinatory system. But yeah, you have your own. So it's
The shapes does look interesting. It's one of those. Again, you end up tagging loads and loads of things that you must research and must look into, and you just never get time.
yeah, and yeah, shapes is it's a tool I always recommend for rigging. Ingo did really great work, and it's very like user friendly. You need,
Yeah,
I mean, like everything, like a learning curve, but once you get it, it's amazing. It's very, it makes the rigging enjoyable, like really fun to do.
yeah, especially when it doesn't drop out or die or explode or.
Yeah, no, it's rock solid. Okay, so yeah, I think we been here more. Oh, it's midnight here. It's hour and a half. I think we've been on the stream, and yeah, I think it's maybe it's time to wrap up. If do you want to add anything else, Mark?
No, I mean, I think I kind of wanted to cover the data side of stuff because that's really where we've put most of the effort, I think. And it's the sort of stuff that is quite boring to do in a video, but actually is particularly things like the health systems. They are absolutely crucial, and it's the sort of stuff that animators look at and go, "Bah, don't need that." It's like, well, yeah, but the people delivering your stuff really, really do need that sort of stuff.
Yeah. One of the things I take from this conversation, and I think it's like the commitment that you do with your like assets and with your rigs, and when you have a long-term productions, in especially in games that it's less forgiver to change the stuff later on the pipeline.
It is,
So you
and
need
if you make
to
if
do
you
it
make a
right
mistake,
from the beginning. Yeah.
exactly. You make a mistake at the start, you're stuck with it. And like I say, there's games that, I mean, we've been on games sometimes that have gone on. I mean, there's one of them we've been on for since we started and still isn't really out, which is the Cloud Imperium stuff. That's still in development, and we're still daily working on that. We're still doing asset, control stuff and tools and extending the systems. But that's kind of the joy of it, because you get them requesting stuff and another one requesting stuff, and things just start knitting together. But you're always in the back of your head trying to figure out that if I change that, that's going to change what they're doing, but then it'll enhance this bit, but break, and it's trying to. You've almost got to sit back from it all and look at how it's designed and how things plug, as opposed to going hell for leather and just writing a tool to do it, because it just, it'll come back and bite you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so thank you so much, Mark, for staying with us like this 2 hours.
That's all right.
With us. I'm sorry, with the bodies, the rigging bodies. Yeah, it's been. I'm in the 2 hours. The almost that we have been working. Yeah, Chris is sharing the DPK link. Yeah, thank you, Chris. And yeah, I hope we can talk again soon with
I'm sure we
new
will.
stuff and
Sure we will.
new fans. Okay, thank you so much, and have a nice day. Thank you
All right,
guys on the chat also to being here with us, and hopefully see you next week. It's gonna be next week with Jeremy Passerin on the weekend, so I hope you can make it. And yeah, that's it. Happy rigging. Bye bye.
See you.